Considering that we just did the mega dead last with 50 movies involved, I figured that this episode should be a little bit more scaled back. And it seemed like a great time to go ahead and cover the Tremors franchise, considering that they're only 7 movies deep. I originally threw in a couple of unrelated films that had similar premises, but then I figured it'd be better to just keep pure. So we just went with the main film series, which didn't include the TV series, and I probably would have included the pilot for the 2018 TV show if it ever got released. But instead, we had just the core 7 films. As always, that roster was sent out to my patrons to rank up, and these guys answered the call. And they watched all 7 and listed them out with their favorite as number 1, second favorite as number 2, and on down the line until they got to number 7, dead last. Then, each film was awarded points, with each number 1 worth 1 point, number 2 worth 2 points, etc. And our lowest scoring film takes the top spot, with the highest scorer being dead last. And this month, including me, there were 31 entries, so the best possible score would be 31 points. And the lowest possible is 217. And you know, since this series started, I've always wondered if there would ever be a clean sweep for a film to be unanimously ranked number 1. And who knows? Maybe this is the month. But enough talking. Let's get ready to rumble. Coming in at dead last with 184 points, which isn't too terrible, all things considered, and the bottom of this one was somewhat close, but our number 7 film is looking to be Tremors 6, A Cold Day in Hell. This one was put in dead last 11 times, 35% of the rankings, so about 1 out of 3 people put it here, and the highest score that it got was 1 third-place vote. And I also had this one in my dead last, although I should point out that I still enjoy it. This is a fun enough film and a decent entry, but the others are just more entertaining. And I know it gets called out a lot, but I think they actually pull off the whole let's film this in South Africa and just color tint the sand to look like snow, like pretty well. I guess they had plans to shoot this one in the mountains of Bulgaria, but had to swap back to South Africa after there were more blizzards than expected up there. Having Jamie Kennedy back in it brings it down, and trying to give him a love interest just doesn't work, because they pair him up with an attractive woman and then she has to pretend to be attracted to him, and just look at this guy. But the biggest thing that this one does that doesn't work is the whole virus aspect that affects Bert. Like, first of all, he's meant to have gotten it from when he was swallowed whole by a graboid back in part 3. But in terms of the franchise, that's meant to be over 10 years ago. And it doesn't make sense that it's this slow-acting infection, but then just hits him really hard all of a sudden after a decade. But I guess they needed to have Michael Gross in this less and have him be less involved. And this was their way of basically getting him out of the movie for a chunk of it. And at the time, they were considering moving him out of the franchise and having Travis become the main character. And that's evident here that they were trying to move that into position. And I suppose if you like Kennedy, that wouldn't bring it down as much, but it brought it down for me. Because I'm not a fan of the actor, nor am I invested in that character. But they didn't really do anything here to amplify any of the characters. They bring in another line to the past by having the daughter of Val and Rhonda show up, but she's not really all that distinctive or interesting, and they spend too much time on the evil corporate crew and the one whiny doctor. But then it just doesn't feel as much like a Tremors movie. Anytime that ass blasters are involved, it's less interesting, because they just act like basic raptor creatures, so there's no unique elements. But then when dealing with the full-grown graboid, no one seems all that concerned. Everyone's walking around on the ground, and there's very little discussion about the rules of it all. And I know that they started doing it in part 5, but this movie is obsessed with having the graboids jump out of the ground like breaching whales. And again, that takes the fun out of what they are and do. It makes them feel more like standard monsters as opposed to the cool underground beasts. I'll say this though, if you're into cool slow-mo shots, this movie has you covered about every 3 minutes or so. But yeah, greater focus on Travis gets this one that dead last spot.
Did you miss me?
Yeah, like a boil on my ass.
Coming in at number 6, and this one was actually kind of close since it was only a 3-point difference with 181. And it's the final film of the franchise, Tremors 7, Shrieker Island. This one was put in dead last 12 times, one more than part 6, and about 39% of the time. So between these two entries, that's 3/4 of the dead last spots. So there's only 8 remaining to give out amongst the other 5 films. It fared a little better on the top end though, but not much considering it also got a high score of 3rd place, but it got placed there twice instead of once. I had this one higher, but not by much since it was my 5th place entry, and it's my favorite of the non-Stampede entries, and that's mainly because there's no Travis. Pretty much immediately, having Jon Heder in this one is a big step up. It's very obvious from the type of character that he's playing that it's possible that he was meant to be Travis in the original script, but since Jamie Kennedy turned it down since they weren't offering enough money, they just tweaked it to make it a new character. But the two are essentially the same guy, and it's wild how different this kind of role is when there's an actor playing it who can actually pull off the drunken jerk who is still charming routine. It's also getting points for bringing in Richard Brake doing his thing and being cool and creepy. I also really like to change up on locations here. After so many of them set in the desert, and then the African desert, and then the African desert pretending to be the Arctic, taking it to a remote tropical island is pretty interesting and gives it a nice change of pace. But the sad part is that they never really take advantage of this environment in terms of a plot point. Like, most of the island looks like it's made of rock, so you'd think there'd be some fun stuff with the graboid there, but they don't really get into all of that, and maybe it's because for the most part they're dealing with Shriekers, and they're just not that interesting in terms of their rules and all. Like, they're basic creatures, and the only thing unique about them is their heat vision, but that's not even that distinct. Plus, I hate their redesign in this film. The original Shriekers had a distinct look to them, and they felt like they could be offshoots of graboids, and they had their own flair. But here, they just look weird and unrelated to any of the other forms. Like, they should serve as a bridge between the full-size graboid and the ass blasters, but they don't look anything like that here. And there's weird stuff going on too, with everyone really doing everything they can to glaze up Bert. And it's like they knew that Michael Gross was up there in years and just not able to do what he used to. So they just had to have everyone talking about how badass he is instead. And it also suffers from what holds all of the Universal entries back. It doesn't spend enough time with the supporting cast, and they're mostly not that interesting. And then there's a bunch of rich hunter assholes who are basically just cannon fodder, so you don't care about them at all. But then there's that ending, and I boosted it up a bit for that because I thought it was a good send-off for the character and a bit of a badass finale. Our number 5 film here had a little bigger jump since it went down to 158, a 23-point drop, and it looks like we're clearing out the non-Stampede entries with Tremors 5, Bloodlines. This one also took 4 dead last spots, so only 13% of them, and now there's only 4 more left. And the highest spot that this one took was 2nd place, which it got twice. And I had this one slightly lower since this was my 6th place vote, and man, I remember being excited about this one. There was an 11-year gap in between movies, and I was ready for more. And then they said 2 words, Jamie Kennedy, and I was instantly deflated. But it still had Bert, and graboids and adventure, so I was still on board. And I still think it's a solid flick. And here's the thing. The graboids get a redesign here, and they try to explain it away by stating that it's because these ones are in Africa, and it's a variation of the species, although there's a little graphic thing in the beginning talking about the grabbies, and it's supposed to be the regular variety, but they're the redesign. It's rumored that they changed the designs to avoid paying Stampede Productions the copyright fees to use their designs, but they do show those earlier in the film as well, so it seems unlikely that that's it. But they also rework the Ass Blaster, and it's partially an improvement, but also partially not. It's an improvement because it looks less dopey, and even though it's all CG now and not practical at all, it looks more realistic. But the design is more generic and doesn't have that unique flavor that the old guys have with that distinct beak. It just feels like any old monster from a creature flick. It kind of made me wish it were more dopey. But the thing that holds this back is the lack of a strong supporting cast, which is what makes the early movies more successful, in my eyes. It could have had a stronger show there if they focused on the people of the village, but they're shoved to the wayside in favor of Bert and Travis, and he's just not a good character at all. And Kennedy just does not have the charm they need to pull this off. So when they try to push a romantic angle again between him and Lucia, it just doesn't click. Because again, look at this guy. Plus, the Ass Blasters just aren't as interesting to me overall, since they're more stock raptor-like characters, which is evident from the kitchen scene here, which lifts wholesale from Jurassic Park. Finally, I straight up hate that they have the tongue tentacles detach, as they weren't meant to be separate creatures and were just tongues. So having them as unique entities just doesn't make sense, and it's kind of weird. They just live inside this bigger thing's mouth? How gross is that? Okay, here's our dead center movie now, in fourth place. This is the most average film on the roster, with 3 above it and 3 below it. And this was another close call, and with 105 points, it's time for Tremors 3, Back to Perfection. This entry did get 1 of the 4 remaining dead lasts, but oh no, it also got 2 number 1 votes, so we don't have a clean sweep after all. And I put this one right where it landed, in 4th place. And from a timeline standpoint, I loved this one so much just because everyone kept repeating over and over again that it was 11 years after the first movie. It was great to see the returning characters again, although I wish that they had been given a little bit more focus. It was clear that they wanted Bert and Desert Jack to be the new Val and Earl, but they didn't click, and Jack is no Val. He's not even Grady from the second film, honestly. And there's a lot of time spent with the love interest of Jack and Jody when you have Miguel, a survivor of the first film, just sort of there as cannon fodder. But I think this is where they started to go astray. It felt like there was an obligation to have the graboids mutate further, and maybe it's just me, but the notion of them flying just doesn't feel like an organic way to take these creatures. It felt more like a way to shift things around and just create new problems. And when I think about the cool underground whale-sized creatures of the first film, little flying raptors just feels less. Plus, the threat of the graboids feels reduced. The idea that Bert can be sucked down by one of them, but then I guess is just alive in it and is able to be rescued by randomly cutting into it with a chainsaw, is a hell of a stretch. Plus, the overall design of the Ass Blasters kind of sucks. Not only do they look dopier, partially because of the CG, but they just seem less intimidating in general. The full-size graboids are a purely huge threat, while the Shriekers have numbers on their side, but there's not many of these things, and several times we see people face off against them and put up a fight, so they just don't seem that too big of a threat. The thing that I did like about this one was the return to there's this many of these things out there, and we're working our way through them aspect that the second one lost with just having dozens and dozens of the creatures. Plus, even though I would rather have seen more focus on the classic characters, I did like the new additions enough that it was consistently entertaining.
You dumb son of a bitch! God! I hate you! I hate you good! You sorry, sick, paranoid, right-wing, rednecks!
Well, top 3 time, and it came quicker when we're only doing 7 movies. But I said this was a close call, and in fact, it came down to a single point because our number 3 film had 104, and it's Tremors 4, The Legend Begins. This one got 2 dead lasts, so that means there's only one more floating out there, and it also got a single first place vote. And my roster matches the consensus once again because this was also my number 3. So my whole list isn't that far off from where it all went. So this one was faced with the challenge of being a movie that went hand in hand with the fact that there was also a Tremors TV show going on at the same time. And I think that a prequel was a nice way to make that work. Like, sure, it doesn't actually work when you try to reconcile it with the first film, in that here it said that Bert's family had been in perfection the whole time, and yet in the first movie, he and Heather were recent arrivals to the area. And Chang, always having lived there, seems off as well, considering that he still has a thick accent. Side note, I guess that in the beginning, Michael Gross thought it would be great to be able to play a character very different than Bert, and he pushed for them to make the character his great-grandmother, and he would play the role as a woman. And you have no idea how much I would pay to see that version of it. But this movie also introduces a new stage to their evolution, but it makes sense in the whole role of their biology. We get to see the stage in between the egg and the graboid, which gives us all of the steps, and they make sure to not have them take up too much of the film before getting to the main event, the larger-sized graboids, which is interesting because this one works in the opposite manner of the previous 2 sequels. Those ones were about starting with the full-size guys and then introducing the variations. But here, we get the new stage first, and then they become the big guys, which I liked as a switch up to the format. Plus, I enjoy the finale with them using more scaled-back weaponry, although I definitely think the killing of one of them with a simple saw doesn't really work, and it just seems too easy. It's time for the big 2 now, and our second place film probably should be obvious here, but it had 98 points, so it was only 6 points lower than Part 4. So this little cluster was all somewhat close, and it's Tremors 2 Aftershocks. It has our final dead last vote, so there's no more of those left, and it didn't get any first place nods, but it did get second place 11 times. And once again, I'm dead on here because this was number 2 for me too. And I still think that this movie's a lot of fun, but it's missing some of the stuff that the first movie had. Like, for one thing, the location just isn't as interesting. Like, we never really get a strong feel for things about the environment when they're out and about, and the oil refinery set just isn't as notable as the town of perfection. It's wild how well that movie was able to make their location feel like a character in the film, and this one doesn't even really try. So it's just like some fields out in the remote area and a generic refinery setting. Plus, there's not much in the way of stakes. I guess even Michael Gross said something about it when they were shooting. It just didn't feel the drive to save the oil drilling guys. And it's because of that notion that they returned it to perfection for the third film. Like, Part 1 is about them saving themselves and their little town, where they all live. This is trying to help out some oil drilling compound? Yeah, let the big guys have it. But to me, the thing that makes this one less interesting overall is the lack of the characters. Like, yes, having Fred Ward as Earl is a ton of points in the film's favor. Him being here is about 75% of the reason why it's my second place. And when Bert comes back into the picture, it's good to see him. But Grady's just not all that compelling or charming, and there's a real lack of other people overall. Like, Kate's a good addition, but they don't really give her a lot to do in terms of her character. However, the transition to facing off against Shriekers makes for some nice plot elements and keeps things fresh, even though I'll admit that I find them less intriguing overall than the full-size Graboids. They're not as new or original because they remind me too much of Raptors, and this was out not long after Jurassic Park, so it felt like we had been seeing a lot of those kind of things at this time.
I feel I was denied critical, need-to-know information.
And here we go, our obvious number one. And this was damn close to being that clean sweep, since with a mere 38 points, we have the original Tremors. Only 3 people out of 31 didn't have this one as their number one spot, and the lowest score that it got was 5th place. And yeah, to recap, it got 28 first place hits. So 90% of the entries put this at the top spot. And the 3 other scores were 2nd, 3rd, and 5th. So this was my 100% clear number one. I saw this one in the theaters, opening night, and I was in love. It was this perfect throwback to the classic monster movies that used to run on Saturday morning. And it feels like a love letter to those kind of movies, but it also doesn't find itself constricted to that. Like this isn't a parody or a tribute film or whatever. It's giving you that vibe, but then modernizing it so you feel like you're watching this thing that's a product of its time, but also tipping its hat to the films of the past. But there's a number of other reasons why this is such a slam dunk. And one of those reasons are the monsters themselves, the Graboids. The film's tagline is, "There's nothing new under the sun, but under the ground," and they do feel new. Like, sure, there's a similarity to the dune sandworms, but how they act, move, and their tongues all feel like this new and distinct monster that we haven't seen before. And they do a great job of defining what the monster is and what its rules are. By the time that this movie's over, you understand this fleshed out entity that they were up against. And given that it's something audiences didn't have a previous notion of, that's a solid achievement. One of the other things that makes this one work so well is the setting. Having it in this remote desert town works in its favor, since you have this little sense of isolation in a way that you're not normally getting. This isn't the woods or whatever, it's the middle of the desert, in the mountains, and there's not much road or places to escape to. And again, by the ending of this movie, this environment feels like its own character. And since it's the desert, it's helped by something that you're not getting a lot of in horror: bright sunlight. Almost all of this movie takes place in broad daylight and doesn't rely on dark shadows to make things scary. Visually, it makes it stand out in a major way. But the main reason to love this one, the thing it has going for it, is the characters. This movie loves its characters. All of them. Every person in this one, including the side characters, they're all so well formed and distinct, so they're not just window dressing. Having it in this tiny town helps with that, since there's only so many people there, but it makes you really invested in each one of them making it through. And yeah, it's our clear number one here, and the closest that we've had to a clean sweep in this whole series. And I guess I'm just resigned to knowing that that's never going to happen, and it deserves this completely.
Broke into the wrong goddamn rec room, didn't you, you bastard?
So there you have it, 7 movies, all ranked up. And let's look at that list. I mean, this is the closest that I've personally come to being the exact roster, with only 2 films out of place for me. Like, just flip-flop those 2 and it matches my consensus completely. But let me know what you would have had and where you would have placed everything. Let me know if there's anything in here that you feel differently about. Maybe you think the first movie is the worst one. I don't know. Maybe you like Jamie Kennedy for some ungodly reason. But yeah, maybe you are Jamie Kennedy, and that's why you like those ones. But tell me that down below in the comments. I want to hear it. Let me know just if you enjoyed this video. Put that down below in the comments as well. I'd like to hear that. If you enjoyed what you saw, hit that like button. Let me know it. If you want to check out my Patreon page, you can go to patreon.com/movietimelines and go there where you can participate in these rankings every single month like these guys do. You can also just be a patron to just help out the channel. You don't have to participate in the rankings. It's up to you. Also, of course, subscribe to the channel. You got to do that and hit the bell to get notified about when new videos come out. And there's going to be another one coming very, very shortly. So thanks a lot, guys, and bye-bye.